Hello, Veronica.
Hello, hi, Brace.
Hi, Veronica. Are you ready for this?
Just a second.
Okay. We will have 5 minutes grand opening, so you can prepare for it.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. So let's start my speech. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome back to the Green Energy Central Asia Virtual. And in this afternoon, we will have a deep dive into the wind energy in Central Asia. And this session will hold 5 keynotes to provide you with the outlook of regional wind development, successful projects, and innovational strategies of the current green wind energy in Central Asia. As we know, Kazakhstan's flatlands are more than 50,000 square kilometers with abundant wind resources, which means electricity generation potential of about 1.82 billion kilowatt-hour per year. And this country's average wind speed is more than 6 meters per second, especially areas as the Amata region and the Shalek corridor. Usually have higher average wind speeds about 7.8 to 9.7 meters per second. And these regions are prepared to build wind farms with a capacity of over 100 megawatts. And Kazakhstan's largest wind farm in operation is located in the Akmola region and erected by the Sumer Energy in 2030. And with a capacity of only with a capacity of the 45.1 megawatts by the end of the January 2020, Kazakhstan has 754 megawatts of wind projects which are in pipeline. Therefore, we still believe there will be more potential for wind energy exploration in Kazakhstan. And in Uzbekistan, we can see a couple of companies have an interest in investing in wind farms, even though the solar resources in Uzbekistan are much larger than wind, which definitely shows the approval of the foreign investors for the potential wind market. As Turkish Ecalco Energy has planned to build a 600 megawatts wind power plant in Sukendaria by 2020. And during the same time, an agreement signed for the 400 megawatts wind plant built in the Naval by Mazda and the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade. Besides, Siemens will invest a 100 megawatts wind project at Zarafan City by the end of the January 2020. Uzbekistan had a total of 1.3 gigawatts wind projects in the pipeline. Okay, after a complete introduction of wind energy in Central Asia, let's get into the significant part of the energy of the Green Energy Central Asia Wind Energy Summit this afternoon, and start with our first speaker, Veronica, correct? The senior banker from the Energy Eurasia, EBRD, with the keynote, current status and the future of the wind power in Central Asia. Hi, Veronica.
Hi, Brace, and glad to welcome participants. I will start sharing.
So, we will also welcome. And are you ready for sharing your screen?
Yes.
Okay, I will stop my sharing and let's just get started. Share your screen and yes, we can see it.
So, good morning, good afternoon, dear participants. I'm here to talk, as introduced by Brace, I'm here to talk about status and future wind power. Brace, please tell me if the sound is not good. So I will first start with speaking about our approach, our operational approach, EBRD's operational approach to investments in Central Asia. So it is based on 3 pillars: policy dialogue, technical cooperation, and investments. So as part of policy dialogue, we are promoting sustainable energy, honest broker role, and share experience and best practices. As part of technical cooperation, we support PPA drafting, grid absorption studies, and the development of regulatory frameworks. And of course, our main role is investment. So we, as part of our investment support, we provide corporate and project finance debt, we provide equity as well. So looking into the overview, the EBRD is a pioneer in supporting sustainable energy projects in the region. And through investments, we aim to support sector reforms that increase competition and liberalization of the market. If we look at Central Asia, includes a number of countries: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Mongolia. Each country is different. If you look into what is required to unlock the potential, it requires strong macroeconomic policies, certainty and predictability of the long-term regulatory framework, bankable transactions which may attract lenders and investors, and reliable, financially stable shareholders and sponsors. The region has a good starting point. It has very good resource potential. It has pragmatic will of the governments to develop strongly focused on developing renewables. It has strong population growth, and it is existing or developing regulatory frameworks. Opportunities include attracting reputable and foreign and local investors, attracting know-how, cost reduction in technology, carbon footprint and emission reductions, and potentially supply carbon credits. Challenges include unpredictable nature and intermittent nature of the renewables, and some of the countries will be facing this unpredictable nature for the first time. Impact of large power volumes, which at some point will start affecting the grid, or may start affecting the grid without sufficient investments into the grid, and diversification of power sector balances. EBRD as a bank has supported in the past 5 years, has supported 17 projects, renewable energy projects, and more than 900 megawatt of renewable capacity, with 700 million EBRD investment. If you look into the region, we have supported renewable energy projects in most of the countries. The countries differ by their potential. So in Tajikistan and in Kyrgyzstan, the countries mostly develop hydropower because this is where the potential is. In Kazakhstan, the country has been developing both solar and wind. As a starting point, our investments have been mostly into solar, but we have just recently signed a sizable wind project in Kazakhstan. It's called Zhanatas wind farm. It's a 100 megawatt wind farm in Kazakhstan. And Uzbekistan is picking up, and they are developing its renewable potential, and they are developing both solar and wind in parallel. So achievements in Kazakhstan include policy dialogue, where EBRD has been substantially involved in assisting the authorities in developing the regulatory framework for the sector. Strong presence on the ground, local currency funding, which is very important, co-financing from climate funds, involvement of other multilateral development banks, and strong interest from private sector. The bank is currently running a turnkey energy auction for 3 wind farms. It is expected to materialize in 2022. The technical cooperation assignments include site selection, resource management, project preparation, and further review of the legislation as might be necessary. New targets for Kazakhstan include 250 megawatt renewables, which Kazakhstan is auctioning this autumn. This includes hydropower, solar, and wind. On wind specifically, it includes 65 megawatt. And the country is on track to achieve its renewable energy targets, which are specifically 3% by year-end 2020 and 5% by year-end 2025. Achievements in Uzbekistan include policy dialogue. We are supporting Uzbekistan with developing the framework for the power sector and for the renewable energy generally. Strong presence on the ground, public sector investments in energy, which support the sector development, and strong interest from private sector that we have already witnessed. We are supporting the first turnkey energy auction for a wind farm in Karakol, Pakistan region of Uzbekistan. It's the first 100 megawatt auction. The auction is ongoing. And Uzbekistan is planning to auction 1 gigawatt wind projects with our support. I would like to look in a little bit more detail in Uzbekistan as a case study. In 2018-2019, we signed 362 million euro financing. This financing is supporting construction of transmission infrastructure. This is important for penetration of renewables because the grid does require investment to support high penetration renewables, which is expected in the future in Uzbekistan. As well as we supported the new gas-fired generation. It is also investing in modern generation is also important to allow stability and flexibility of the sector. The bank has signed an MOU on strategic cooperation with Uzbekistan in the power sector, and then signed a specific MOU on supporting the wind auctions. We are developing our initiatives in close cooperation with other MDBs and in line with our green economy transition mandate, which specifically calls, among other, to support development of renewable energy. We have a number of policy dialogue activities in the making. Or completed. This includes a roadmap for attracting investments, engagement regarding tariff affordability, engagement on the climate and carbon side of the power sector, which we find particularly important given the sector composition in Uzbekistan. And we are currently supporting the country with a new electricity law. So if you look into Uzbekistan, the power sector is currently dominated by gas-fired generation. The government has announced a commitment to support 5 gigawatt of solar power and 3 gigawatt of wind power by 2030. And accelerated development of renewable energy is required to optimize the cost of production and basically to diversify the mix, which is currently biased towards thermal power generation. And the government is actively implementing energy sector reforms, allowing it to attract interest from investors into renewable energy. And specifically in last year, the state power utility Uzbekenergo was unbundled, which was an important step to setting a new composition of the market. And in the coming years, the government expects substantial investments both on generation and transmission side of the sector. Our first auction, the first wind power auction, is currently ongoing. It is with regards to 100 megawatt wind capacity located in Karakol, Pakistan region of Uzbekistan. Our assistance includes technical cooperation assignment, which included assistance with site selection, with environmental assessment, with auction design and implementation support. And the project will be based on power purchase agreement to be signed with the National Electric Grid Company of Uzbekistan, which is currently acting as the off-taker, and with the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade, which will be signing the government support agreement on behalf of the government. The auction has received quite a good feedback from potential investors. 70 companies expressed interest to participate. The auction is currently at RFQ stage, and the BRD will be glad to consider offering financing for this project. This is it on my side.
Okay, thank you, Veronica, and thank you for your valuable presentation at the stance of the EBRD and to give us full perspective of the bank and investment in green energy, especially the wind energy in Central Asia. And but we still got some questions here. That the first one is there any possibilities of the storing the electricity and generated by wind power for using them in the night time?
Right. Thank you very much, Chris, for this question. So energy storage is of course a mature and proven technology to provide a number of grid services, from short-term frequency voltage support to guarantee the stability of the grid, to multi-hour, if not even, which includes day and night, if not even seasonal storage to improve the overall efficiency of the energy system. So technically, it's right. It's right technology, of course. This becomes fundamental when the share of variable renewable energy capacity reaches and surpasses 20 or 30% penetration. So when the likelihood of periods of overproduction from wind and solar start to become a real and potential issue for the grid. Storage offers the opportunity not to lose this excess electricity and reuse it when needed. So as such, this is of course a valuable and helpful technology that at some point in time we would expect to be deployed in Central Asia, but maybe at a later stage when the penetration of renewable energy is really at a higher stake.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question about what is the timeline for release of the RFP for 100 megawatts wind project in Uzbekistan.
So the auction is currently at the RFQ stage. The timeline for the auction was provided in the profiling teaser of the project, which was shared at the stage of expressions of interest request. So RFP is expected to be launched. The RFP stage is expected to be launched later this year. So it is currently at RFQ stage. As a result of RFQ stage, pre-qualified bidders will be announced still this year, and the RFP will be launched.
Okay, thank you so much, Veronica. And here we got some news questions about the from both Samantha. You can check it on the Q&A live panel.
Right. Shall I stop sharing in the meantime, or?
Oh no! You still have the time.
Mm-hmm. Let me check it. Just a second.
Oh, yes, you can start. You can stop the share. You can stop the sharing screen and answer the question from the boss.
Okay.
About the operations.
So the question is about operations and maintenance costs and the opportunities in wind energy sector in Uzbekistan. So operation maintenance costs, this is something yet to be seen in Uzbekistan when we have the project live. Right now, this is the first 100 megawatt project which is being auctioned, so it's a little bit difficult to comment on operations and maintenance. It might be expected that operations and maintenance of wind projects in Uzbekistan, I mean, generally operations and maintenance are relatively let's say they should not be that much different depending on the country you invest in. So it would have been expected that it would follow the precedents in other countries. So with regards to opportunities in wind energy sector in Uzbekistan, so right now it's 100 megawatt project, which is auctioned. Generally, the government has announced the plan to support investments into 3 gigawatt of wind power by 2030. Some of this some of these projects are already in the making. Some of these projects are expected to be auctioned next year. So in general, it's 3 gigawatt of wind capacity that the government wants to see live or invested into by 2030.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. And is there any questions to ask Veronica to answer the question about the investment and from the bank's angle?
I can see there is another question from Alexander, which I can also address. So the question is, dear Veronica, you told that in Kazakhstan you are following 3 turnkey projects. Does it mean you are planning to invest? So in Kazakhstan, we are supporting Kazakhstan with 3 turnkey auctions. Of course, we will be happy to consider investing once these auctions materialize and once the winning bidders have been selected. We have extensively supported renewable energy sector in Kazakhstan on both solar and wind side.
Oh, there's not one. In case the foreign investors participate in renewable energy projects in Central Asia, how they can hedge currencies risks. Would you like to know? Oh.
Right. This is a good question, of course, about hedging. I think it very much depends on how the tariff is structured. So in Kazakhstan, where tariff has local is structured to be in local currencies, and in an ideal situation, you would attract financing in local currency. For instance, the bank does offer local currency financing in Kazakhstan, where in some other countries the tariff itself is structured in foreign currency, so that there will not be a currency mismatch if you attract financing in foreign currency. But that's of course a very, very valid question to consider and discuss.
Okay, thank you, Veronica, and thank you for your presentation. And you really give us a clear answer about the EBRD's perspective in Uzbekistan's wind projects. And thanks again for you, and really appreciate. Okay.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, now we finish. Now with a great perspective of the wind energy, let's get into the wind energy projects roadshow with 2 ongoing successful projects in Central Asia. And welcome our first speaker, the founding executive director from the EPDA, and his speech will introduce EPDA's wind power projects in Kazakhstan. And let's learn about it. Hi, Karim. Karim, are you ready for this? Oh, yes, I can see you.
Oh, sorry, hello. Sorry,
hello.
Now it's okay. Yeah, it should be fine now.
Yes,
Good.
Okay, you can share the screen.
Okay, I'll do that right away.
Okay. Yes, we got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much for organizing this conference. And good morning or good afternoon to everyone. So I'll be talking about the development of wind projects in Kazakhstan specifically. So I will introduce I would say the auction mechanism and some challenges to successfully implement the projects in case you are awarded following the auction. And then I can conclude with some recommendations. So let me first introduce myself and my company. So I founded the EPDA last year in July 2019. So EPDA, we actually we monitor global market trends, and we are connecting to renewable energy project developers around the globe, and we offer high quality transactions to investors. So basically, we are a project origination platform, especially focusing on renewable energy. We are mostly active in Asia and Europe and Central Asia. So far, we have originated 2.6 gigawatts. And for our first year, we are expecting to close 4 transactions for a total of around 150 megawatts. And then next year, we're planning to close 500 megawatts. So basically what we do is we screen projects opportunities. We pre-negotiate either the JV or the acquisition terms, prepare the financial model and the information memorandum, and we help investors to take decisions swiftly. So our projects are usually in late development stage, or it could be in construction or even in operation. And we do work on some greenfield projects and tenders, like for example, in Kazakhstan. Okay. So that's what we do here. It's so that it gives you a more detailed understanding of exactly where we, what kind of services we provide. So the first steps are in yellow. This is what we do, and we are taking somehow the risk of these different services. The investors don't have to support us during this stage. So you see project identification, pre-due diligence, pre-negotiation of the terms, preparation of the information memorandum and financial model. And then once I would say the package is ready to be presented to investors, it doesn't mean that the terms are cast in stone, but it means that at least we can present that. Then the investor can step in and start the negotiation with the project owners. So these are our selected references. So we have a framework agreement with Total Eren, which is an IPP, French IPP, and they are very active in Uzbekistan, but also in Kazakhstan. They close 150 megawatts solar in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan also 100 megawatts in solar. We are working on a case-by-case basis with all the investors from the UAE, because my company is based in Dubai. So Amea Power, but also French, General du Solaire, and India, Jackson. So you can see some of the projects that we're doing. In Italy, Greenfield, 20 megawatt, India, 34 megawatt operational project under construction in Cambodia, a large portfolio in Vietnam. And we're also looking at hydro projects in Vietnam. Okay, so that's the short introduction. So now let me start maybe with just a global, I would say understanding of what's happening today in the energy transition. So I would say that we have a carbon budget, and which means that we have to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2050 if we want to remain below 2 degrees in terms of global warming. And if we take the 2016 global emissions level, then it means that we basically have 25 years to do that, to have a 50% chance to stay below 2 degrees. So for that, we have to almost double actually the renewable energy. So we have to transition between an oil-based economy to a green electron economy. And for that, renewable energy is one of the key elements. And investments has to double, meaning that today we are around the $300 billion if we take hydro and biomass and so on, and we have to reach above $7 billion USD, 700 billion USD per year. So now, in a context where actually we have a lower demand of oil, I mean this is forecasted because mainly of EV, electrical vehicle, and at the same time you can see the LCOE, and this is what is driving the actually energy transition. We have the LCOE for offshore wind, onshore wind, and especially solar actually, which is going very, very fast, which is decreasing very, very fast. And now in some regions, we are below 1.5 cents USD per kilowatt hour. So now, if we take Kazakhstan, so you can see that actually the GDP of Kazakhstan is still mainly based on extractive industry and oil and gas. And you can see that the tenge here, there was 2 depreciation, and it's a bit volatile, and it's the tenge and USD currency is decreasing, and I will come back back to that after that. So now regarding the power sector in Kazakhstan, you could see that it's actually mostly based on coal and then also natural gas. It will together you have almost 85%. And actually the power plants are quite old. Some were installed in the 80s, 90s, and so on. And today, actually, so a few years ago, the government has started a very successful renewable energy program to actually, kind of try to switch from fossil fuel to renewable energy. But today we're still, far from seeing this complete switch, because we are still below the 2 gigawatts of installed capacity. As you can see, actually in the table, you have a gigawatt of wind and 500 megawatt of solar, but hopefully it will increase over time. So now this is so today, before the regulatory framework was a feed-in tariff, and now it became an auction system. So you can see that this year, the capacity allocated is in the table on the left. You have 50 megawatts of wind, large scale. You have hydro, and then now solar actually remain with a low capacity below 20 megawatt. And you can see actually the price which have been achieved in the past, which are between 3 and 4 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a huge decrease compared to the feed-in tariff, where prices were above the 11. So how to participate in the auction, because that's the only way now today to implement projects in Kazakhstan. That's important to understand that. So you have to prepare for bidding. You have to provide a financial guarantee, and then there is a trading session which lasts 3 hours, during which there is a digital auction. And so you put the price, and at the end of the day, at the end of the 3 hours, the lowest price will win, and there will be an announcement, and you will be eligible to sign a PPA with the Financial Settlement Center, FSC, which is the buyer of electricity for renewable energy. So how do you participate? You can see you need a land plot. You need to define your minimum capacity that you want to bid, and some documentation that you need to provide. So the process is rather simple. But then after, if in case you are awarded, then you have to provide a performance bond of 10,000 tenge per kilowatt, and which will be valid for 37 months post the signing of the PPA. But then you have 18 months to reach ready to build stage, meaning that ready to build stage in Kazakhstan means that you need to issue a document to the Financial Settlement Center saying that, okay, now I have all the authorizations and I'm ready to build the plant. And you have 36 months to reach the COD. So the 36 months start at the signing of the PPA. So basically, if you have 18 months to reach if you reach ready to build stage in 18 months, then you only have 18 months to reach COD. So you need to have that in mind. And then, there are some extensions which are allowed, but either they are costly, it will cost you a part of your bid bond or of your performance bond, or there was an exception for COVID, where developers were allowed to have, because of the COVID situation, where developers were allowed to have a year extension. So now, what's the resource in Kazakhstan? You can see that a lot of sites actually are between 7 meters per second and 8.5 meters per second, and capacity factors are above 37 in P75. So basically, you really have a good wind resource actually in Kazakhstan. Now, the biggest issue, the biggest challenge, and probably this is also why you have a reduction of the capacity, is the grid, because the grid is basically based based on a centralized system where you have a lot of large coal and gas plants, whereas now you need to reach places where you have good wind speed and decentralized system and so decentralized generation, and therefore you do have KIGOC will have to invest a lot in grid in order to absorb more electricity. So that would be the biggest constraint, and this is where you need to carefully choose the site. Now, what are the key development milestones? So obviously you have to have a met mass. Have in mind that you have a temperature issue in winter. So I could see actually devices where the data were not available during winter because it's -20, -30. So you need to make sure that your sensors can support such a temperature. The permitting process is quite a journey because you have to reach numerous administrations, maybe at least 10 different administrations to get the different authorizations like archaeological, like environment, like, etc. But also you have to obviously sign your PPA, the Green Connection Agreement. You now have an investment license that you need to sign, which is very important because to reach such low prices, you have some help for support for the tax of the project company and so on. So this is very important point. Then on the land, you have to make sure that you have the right of ways to the grid connection. As I mentioned, you are usually at least 10 kilometers away, so you need to make sure that this is appropriately addressed. And then the bird study also, so it depends on the bank, but if you rely on DFIs, especially EBRD and Asia Development Bank, which are the two main lenders for the sector, then you have to have a bird study and have in mind that you have 2 seasons for the birds in Kazakhstan, and therefore it's usually lasts at least 12 months actually to do that. Then you have a PSD, which is the key feasibility, which is the key study that you need to show to the administration in order to demonstrate that you are ready to build the plant. And this is, following the PSD that actually you get an authorization that you can send to your financial settlement center to get their approval. So it's within the 18 months period. So this PSD actually, it's very costly. It's at least $300,000 usually, and it's a lengthy study. It takes at least 4, 5, sometimes 6 months. So it's a very complicated document, and you have to rely on local engineering firms, which are well experienced for that. But then it should be properly managed. And then obviously, if you are buying into a project, which an existing project, then you need to sign your SPA, and this is also although it depends on the negotiation with the local owner, obviously, but still it's a lengthy process, at least 2 months, 3 months. So now I would say regarding the PPA and the financing, and this is a very important point when you develop your wind project in Kazakhstan. So the first one is the backstop of the government from the government of the obligation of the utility of the financial settlement center. So basically, EBRD negotiated a few years ago. I think it was during the Astana Expo 2017. So they negotiated a document which is called a project support agreement, so which has to be signed with the Ministry of Energy, and this is the backstop actually for the financing. So and now ADB recently joined also the team actually to get this PSA. So in case you are working with DFI, you have to get this document, and this explains also why other DFIs are today not working in Kazakhstan. It's because the PSA has been agreed with EBRD and now with ADB, but other lenders they are not extremely supportive of this mechanism today. So that means that you don't have a lot of lenders actually active in Kazakhstan. And then the rest, local banks, so far they are not really providing non-recourse. Also, I heard that some of them they could, but I've never seen any financing actually relying on them. So bank, that's the first point to see. Now, the second one is the index on the PPA. Actually, the moment that in your financing you have a USD financing, even if it's for 5 or 10% total capex, then actually you switch to a formula where, and this is the second in the table, as you may see this complicated formula with 0.3, 0.7, and so on, which means that actually only 30% of your PPA price will rely on the local CPI, which is, depending on how you forecast it, at least above 5 or 6 or 7%. And then 70% is based on your exchange rate. And the 70% actually of the price, as you can see actually in the formula, how it is calculated, the exchange rate, it's an average of the last year. So it's very imperfect. And so you still take a USD risk, and plus you don't get the local CPI. And therefore, the moment that you get this USD financing, then you have to not only handle the somehow imperfect USD protection, but also a lower CPI. So I mentioned that because obviously to support the sector, EBRD and ADB, at least EBRD, they have what they call a CTF, which is financing which help to decrease the interest rate. But then the moment you get the CTF, then you are losing the CPI and so on. If you have financing 100% in tenge, then you have the simple formula, which you can see actually on the left side, which is only indexed to CPI. So now the challenges. So the challenges, I would say that although the sector as well, somehow, you do have investors, foreign investors active in Kazakhstan. The returns actually are getting lower and lower, whereas the risk framework is not really improving somehow, because you still have the same PPA and so on. So I would like to list maybe four challenges. The first one is the EPC prices. So you do have logistic issues because it's a landlocked country and so on. So the price of logistics for now is very, very expensive. So the best, I would say, most of the wind turbines are coming from China. It's either Goldwind or Envision. And then also you have actually a lack of experience from the local industry to build these wind farms. And sometimes you don't even have the appropriate cranes which are available actually to install the larger turbines. So EPC prices remain challenging. Then you do have, a challenge in the financing, because it's not yet diversified. So EBRD and Asian Development Bank have been doing everything, and now you have also financing from China, and this explains why you have a profile of developers which are either mostly from China. So now a higher percentage actually is coming from China, and some international developers, investors, which are working with EBRD and Asian Development Bank. The PPA challenges, I mentioned them. And then the fourth one is, I mentioned that also previously, which is having a good wind speed close to grid connection points. So I would like to conclude. I don't know, Brace, if it's okay to conclude now. I don't know regarding the time. Sorry, I don't.
Oh, okay, sorry. You can carry on. There's 2 minutes left. And
okay, fine. So as a conclusion, I mean, so from my personal experience with different investors in Kazakhstan, and I would say from also the experience of several actually investors, actually Kazakhstan is an excellent country to do business. The government is really supportive of foreign investors. You have now the Astana International Financial Center. You have an acceptable regulatory framework to protect investors. You have excellent local partners, either law firms, either engineering firms, and so on. You have excellent advisors. The FSC, which is a very important point, they pay their bills on time. So the overall framework is really good, and this is why you have a very successful development of the renewable energy program and development of wind in the country. And this is what you can see actually now, and you can see that the capacity for this year also we are in the middle of the COVID crisis, so it can explain that also. But you could see actually that the capacities were decreasing, and I would say that this PPA reference to USD, it's one of the biggest limits. And then you have the grid development. I mean, as long as the grid is not developing, according to decentralized generation plans, then you will have a big bottleneck, which is, a pity, because you do have a excellent wind resource and also a good solar resource, but wind is really, really good. And so for that, all that would actually lead to an increase in the volumes. And this is how you can actually decrease the price further in Kazakhstan. You need to increase the volumes of the capacity. And this is how you will be able to switch from, having today the percentage is roughly 10% that we have in renewable energy. So we could easily actually go to 30% without any, risk in terms of intermittency, especially since the grid is actually flexible, and then the local banks also have to step in now and also go non-recourse, and that's a very important point. And so altogether, if you can solve these issues, the political will in Kazakhstan, that you will have a more ambitious integration of renewable energy in the power sector.
Okay, Karim, you finished?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Karim. Thank you for your really available presentation of EPDA's projects, and really full with experience and details about the operation experience. I believe this will be a successful project and really valuable stories for other developers and investors to consider as a good example. Really, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karim. And okay, so now let's, after the first project with the full experience, Karim, can you stop to sharing the screen and let the next master speakers to share Abdullah share? Okay, thank you, Karim. And now
I apologize.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Hello, Abdullah.
Hello, good morning,
Hello.
Good afternoon, good evening. I'm not sure where everyone is,
Okay.
but hello, everyone.
Okay, let's start the second project keynotes with Abdullah Zayed, the head development and Western of Asia area of Mazda. He will bring us the keynote about Mazda's 500 megawatts wind power project in Uzbekistan. Okay, let's start it.
Hello, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So I'll start with the quick introduction about myself before I go to the presentation. So my name is Abdullah Zayed. I'm currently the head of development and investment responsible for Asia. I've been in Mazda for quite some time now, 10 years. But not fully in Mazda, on and off, more or less, but been in the renewable energy sector or energy sector for almost now 10 years. I'm responsible to look at all the development and investment opportunity in Asia, with a specific focus in Central Asia. And in this presentation, I think we'll shed some light more on Uzbekistan as part of Central Asia. And the way that I will conduct this presentation, just to set the scene, is that I'll talk briefly about Mazda in general, and then I'll talk generally about our experience in Uzbekistan, and then finally talk a little bit about Zarafshan project and our project in Uzbekistan. I was planning, to be honest, to spend some time on the development activities of wind technology and the wind technology itself and the characteristics of it, but I think Karim managed to cover that pretty well in the previous presentation. So I'll try to not duplicate whatever Karim said before in regards to the wind technology, and try to talk about new things in this presentation. So as for Masdar, I mean, Masdar was established back in 2006, and the official name for us is Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company. We are a global leader in renewable energy and sustainable real estate development. So as you can see, I mean, we have more than 14 years of experience in developing renewable energy technologies. And I think one of the stories that I always like to tell or to talk about in the beginning is that the origin and the meaning of the name Masdar, because it reflects the mandate that Masdar have and reflect our vision as a company. So Masdar, it's an Arabic word. It means basically origin or the source. And the reason behind this name is that when Masdar was established back in 2006, as everyone was aware, the renewable energy was not the mainstream. Not a lot of people were talking about renewable energy, and it was not widely used globally. In 2006, our leadership had the vision to establish the company and to be the source and the origin of renewable energy, and to house the knowledge locally within the United Arab Emirates, Middle East, and globally, and be a leader in this sector and deploy this knowledge worldwide. And I think now we can proudly say as Masdar that we have achieved this vision. We now one of the leaders in the renewable energy sector worldwide. We have the knowledge and we are deploying this knowledge worldwide. So since 2006, we are active in more than 30 countries globally. We are developing some of the world's largest solar and wind energy projects and advancing clean tech innovations. And one of the things also to note about Masdar, we have two main business units. One is the clean energy unit, which is mandated to develop utility projects, small scale projects, off-grid solutions, rooftop solution, big scale project, utility projects, and so on. And we have the real estate unit, or the sustainable real estate unit, where they are mandated to develop urban sustainable cities. And one of their biggest projects is a city called Masdar City, which is one of the world's first low carbon city in the world that's currently built and being further developed in Abu Dhabi city, and which is an area called Masdar City itself. Masdar is owned by a Mubadala investment company. Mubadala investment company is owned by the government of Abu Dhabi, mandated to provide sustainable financial returns to the government of Abu Dhabi, and they currently have more than 230 billion US dollar assets under management. And Masdar is part of that Mubadala investment group, which invests in multiple sectors across all industries within the UAE and also globally. And one of the things to note about Mubadala that they are active in even more than countries that Masdar is, and they have footprints in more than 60 countries worldwide. I'm not going to spend too much time on the history of Masdar and talk about all the years and the achievements in all the years, but I think one key message here to note on this slide is that since the establishment of Masdar in 2006, we started developing renewable energy projects. One of the first projects that we have done, and again, this was almost 40 years ago, was a 10 megawatt PV plant that was built in Masdar City to supply Masdar City with sustainable and renewable electricity. And at that time, I think it was one of the biggest in the Middle East and maybe in MENA region, a 10 megawatt plant. And now I know we're talking about gigawatts of power plants, but at that time it was an achievement, and it was one of our first projects that enabled us to gain the knowledge internally. During the first 5 to 6 years of Masdar establishment, we have invested in various technologies on the international market. And I would note only two of these, not to spend too much time here, is one is we've invested in Spain for concentrated solar power technologies with a combined capacity of 120 megawatt, including a tower technology and the parabolic trough technology. And in 2013, also we have invested in an offshore wind farm in the United Kingdom, which at the time was the biggest offshore wind farm with a capacity of 630 megawatt. So during the initial years of Masdar, we've invested a lot. We've looked at different markets. We've gained knowledge. We've gained experience, and we've managed to build the capabilities internally within Masdar to enable us to achieve our vision, which, as I mentioned in the beginning, is to deploy the knowledge and the experience locally and internationally. So since then, we have started to participate more actively in renewable energy tenders, public tenders, indirect investments and acquisitions, in building our relationship with different strategic partners globally, and increasing our capacity and growth of renewable energy projects. And so far, we have achieved or invested in more than 5 gigawatt internationally, with a combined value of around $400 billion as Masdar. In addition to the utility projects, Masdar also takes into different initiatives, whether it was from the government of Abu Dhabi or whether it was by Mubadala Investment Company or Masdar itself. And these initiatives include support to, let's say, in a way, remote areas worldwide, where we, as Masdar, go and build off-grid solutions, off-grid projects and solutions, and provide electricity to remote areas globally. And I'll touch a little bit on them later on. We also host the World Future Energy Summits that happens every year in Abu Dhabi in January. But of course, during the current challenging situation globally because of COVID-19, next year it will be held virtually, but it will not be physically. We are living in the new world, and I think everyone is adapting now to this new world that we are living. So I've touched a little bit on these points. I'll just go through them quickly. So as I've said, as Masdar, we've developed renewable energy projects across 30 countries. We are one of the largest developers of off-grid renewable energy in the world, with a combined off-grid solutions of 100 megawatt. And I think if you're aware of the off-grid renewable energy projects, these the capacities comes in terms of from 1 kilowatt up to maybe maximum and a very rare situation 1 megawatt. So 100 megawatt of off-grid renewable energy projects. It's a huge number of projects. And also, as Masdar, we contribute to displace nearly around 5.4 million metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. We have a gross capacity of over 5 gigawatts globally, with a combined value of more than 14 billion. And this is just a snapshot of some of our projects and a map to just visualize it. I get a lot of questions on the slide on they see projects like in the middle of the ocean, like somewhere. And then, as you can see, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse or not, but if you look at close to the United States and close to Australia, there is 2 projects highlighted in this map. And this relates to the initiatives that I've mentioned that Masdar also carries. And these projects include initiatives to provide electricity to remote islands and areas in the Pacific Islands and the Caribbean Islands, where Masdar have developed several projects to supply the remote islands and communities with electricity in these islands. It was an interesting experience and challenging experience for us as Masdar, because every island have a unique type of characteristics to it, and we had to come up with unique solutions that caters to the island specific conditions. I don't want to spend too much time on Masdar. I want to jump into Uzbekistan as much as we can. But in general, so we have a global outreach. We've almost went to all the continents all over the world. We've invested in different and various type of technologies, including ground-mounted solar PV. We are also developing in floating solar PV. We've invested in concentrated solar power, parabolic tower technology with storage and so on. We've also developed hybrid solutions, big scale ones that include CSP, PV, and battery. We've developed projects onshore. Recently, in the past 2 to 3 years, also started developing waste to energy projects. And we are currently constructing 2 of them, one in the United Arab Emirates and one in Australia. So Masdar in Uzbekistan. In Uzbekistan, we've started looking at the market a few years back. And I think as Masdar, we were one of the first companies that showed interest in the market and looked at the potential that the country had, and we believed in the potential that they had. And I think we can see it now as an evidence that the country is developing and moving towards the right way to develop more renewable energy projects and to putting together the regulatory framework that support such development. So for Masdar in Uzbekistan, we started our committed journey, let's say, by winning the IFC scaling solar program tender, which was a 100 megawatt solar PV project. Now we call it Nurlavoi solar project. Masdar participated in this tender alongside multiple international developers, and we have submitted the best commercial offer at 2.6 cents per kilowatt hour. And I think this was one of the, and as Masdar, again, this relates to our vision and mandate, right? And we want to deploy renewable energy worldwide and spread the knowledge that we have. And that allowed us to gain a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge on this sector. And that's allowed us to, in a way, shape the prices in different markets. And I think the price that we have submitted on this tender have, in a way, shaped the prices in this country. It's a, you know, the tariff that was provided based on a long experience that Masdar has in the sector. And it's something that's very achievable. And so far, we have seen some great transparency and support from the government of Uzbekistan and support from their side on achieving this project and materializing it. The expected operation for this project hopefully will be by the end of next year. Again, in a way, I think, as everyone knows, we are going through difficult, how to put it in the best way, situation globally, right? Because of the current COVID-19 situation, which impacted, I think, everyone on a personal level and also all the businesses on a business level. But despite that, we are still committed and we are progressing on the project, and we are targeting to achieve the commercial operation of this project by the end of next year. As for our second project, and I think the key topic of this presentation, it's the wind power plant that we have in Uzbekistan. It's called Zarafshan Wind Plant. It's a 500 megawatt single project. We have signed the project documents, so that includes the power purchase agreement and the investment agreement with the government June this year. And because the Nurlavoi project, the scaling solar project, was developed before it, so we used the scaling solar program documentation and the mechanism of that it was developed, and we reflected that on the wind power plant. So we don't need to create things from zero. So we've used the Nurlavoi as a basis to discuss the project with the government of Uzbekistan. And the project documents, in a way, are similar to what I think everyone has seen in the IFC scaling solar program. In terms of the project itself, I think 500 megawatt wind farm, it's it's a huge project. It's not a small project. It can be one of the largest in the world, and definitely one of the largest in Central Asia in terms of capacity. And so as I have said, we have signed the project agreement in June this year. The project will be built on a standalone IPP basis, developed on a build on operate for a 25 year offtake agreement with a constant tariff. And the project includes, the usual mandate for the developer, which is the development, permitting, financing, design, engineering, etc., of the wind farm. The project is located around 20 kilometers east of the town of Zarafshan in Naboi region, which is the same region that the solar project is also located, but a bit far from it, since a huge region. And you can see on the right the more or less the project structure, which I think if you look at it, you will know that it's a typical structure for renewable energy projects developed on IPP basis. So what is the benefits of wind energy? And again, I'll try not to spend too much time maybe on this. These are general knowledge. So of course, the wind energy is a renewable source of energy, inexhaustible, 100% clean. It reduces the reliance on fossil fuels, reduces energy imports, of course, creates local employment, and contribute to the sustainable development of the electricity or the energy sector. Specifically talking about the Zarafshan benefits in terms of capacity, as I mentioned, 500 megawatt, it can save or save 1.1 million tons of carbon dioxide per year and creates more than 1,000 jobs during construction and supply almost 500,000 homes with the electricity. And as a general trend of wind energy, and I think this is also more or less general knowledge, it keeps increasing on a yearly basis, and the deployment of wind energy and the capacity, it's increasing. This is a bit technical slide, just to talk about the basics of generating electricity from wind energy. And as you know, as wind or any movement has, to some extent, a sort of energy. So when this wind or energy hits the blades, it rotates the blades. The blades rotate the rotor, and then it goes. The momentum goes to the generator, and the generator generates electricity, and then the electricity is taken to the transformer, and then to the grid or the national grid power lines, and then supplies the homes. Again, this is general slide on the technicality of the wind turbine and how this is. In terms of the site that we are currently developing the project on, so the area of the site that we've currently looked at, or initially have looked at, was actually more than 12,000 hectares. But then after further optimization, we've reduced the land area and focused on roughly 8,000 hectares of land. We have installed 5 met masts on site that are currently operational and measuring the wind data for the site. And overall, from previous studies, the wind speed on this area is over 7 meters per second. And I think, as everyone is aware, is the 3 meters per second is the cut-in speed for the wind turbine. And as you can see from the graphs here, is that the average wind speed is always above that on daily basis or on monthly basis. So we can assume a continuous supply of wind energy and electricity throughout the year. Of course, in different capacities throughout the year, depending on the season and the time of the day. And the production in general increases at dusk which also makes the wind farms in Uzbekistan, or at least in this area, compatible with the solar PV, where in solar PV the opposite happens, and they can work in good compatibility, and then generally speaking. And then finally, on the timeline of the project, again, I was planning to spend some time here on the project development activities and what's needed to be done, but I've mentioned that Karim already covered that pretty well. And I think, generally speaking, we can apply the same methodologies in general in Uzbekistan, right? So one of the things to note here is that this project, it's the first of its kind in Uzbekistan. And currently we are taking the Uzbekistan related stakeholders with the journey with us. Everyone is learning, everyone is adapting, and everyone is trying to find the best way to fit this project with the current regulations that's there in Uzbekistan, and what's the best way on how to reflect the international standards on the local regulations and requirements. And so far, and I think the government of Uzbekistan have shown great flexibility, great support, great initiative to realize this project and make it happen. They have been part of the journey from day one, and they are still part of the journey with us, providing support when is needed. They have showed their commitment to the renewable energy sector and their willingness to add more capacity and to expand this sector and to further implement more projects. And I think we can see that from the various initiatives that they have announced and the coming tenders that happening this year and next year, sponsored by the government itself. So they have the drive, they have the willingness to develop more projects in general in the Republic of Uzbekistan. And as Masdar, as I've said, we've kept an eye on the market since a long time. We like the market, we like the government there, we like how the people talk there, we like their attitude in general about the sector, about the renewable energy, and we want to further grow in Uzbekistan and continue doing more projects in the country. So in terms of the general milestones or the timeline of the project, so as I mentioned, we've signed the project documents in June this year. We plan to achieve financial close sometime next year by September. And then the construction will start also by the end of next year. And the completion of the project will be on two phases. Phase one, almost 250 megawatts, planned to be completed in April 2030. And then the final COD is planned to be achieved on October 2040. So I think that concludes my presentation at this stage. Brace, not sure if we have more time maybe to talk a little bit about other things, or that's it.
Yes, we got about 4 minutes to answer the questions. And here we got 3 questions for you. And after that, the first one is where do the Masdar see the bigger upside regarding Uzbekistan wind in the next 5 years?
The biggest, sorry?
Here, where do the Masdar see the bigger upside regarding Uzbekistan wind in next 5 years?
Yeah, so as I've said, right, and this is the first of its kind in Uzbekistan, and the government of Uzbekistan have showed their interest and their potential in that they want to grow further. The upside, speaking about the electricity sector or the electricity market in Uzbekistan, that they don't have a lot of wind energy, and increasing the capacity of the wind energy in the country will enhance further their supply of electricity, and there's also their sources of electricity. So that's definitely going to be an upside from them from electricity perspective. And of course, for us as developers, and I've mentioned, we also eager to get more projects in Uzbekistan. So that's one of the things that we are keeping a close eye on the
possibility possibilities of the storing the electricity generated by. Oh, I see. Oh, it's wrong. And what is rated capacity of each turbine for the 500 megawatts project? You answer this question.
Yeah. So in terms of the capacity, I'll say it's 500 megawatt. The site that we have, it's a huge site, as I've said, and we are looking at now at 8,000 hectares. And the initial design of the initial plan that we have developed, and this still we did not finalize yet the design, it's still in ongoing process. But the farm will include more than 100 wind turbines. Which between I think 100 to 130 wind turbines in general. So that can give you a rough idea about the size of each turbine.
Okay, thank you. And the third is so it's on the Q&A live panel, and from the Roman Walensky, and he asked about if you could answer him whether you attract the local engineering companies when implementing the wind power projects in the CIS region. From the Roman Walensky.
Yeah, of course. I mean, from our side as Masdar, and as I've said, it's also reflected in our vision and as Masdar, and we want to deploy the knowledge that we have worldwide. We want to make people more aware about renewable energy. We want, and the best way to do that is to engage with the governments directly, to engage with the local suppliers directly, to engage with the local engineers and the local communities. But of course, at the end of the day, we also have a commercial mandate. So if it's a reasonable ask and it's a reasonable proposal from the local provider and the local suppliers and the local engineers, then definitely it's something we will consider for sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zaid, and many thank you for your valuable presentation of Masdar's ongoing projects. And in the talk, I think all developers will keep that in mind and consider it as a good example. And thank you so much.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, and I see many attendees and the speakers have their own questions, and due to the agenda's time limited, we cannot have all questions answered. So if you want to have the connection and the questions, please just join the one-to-one meeting platform after this session, and you can answer the question and make more details about this issue.
Bryce, sorry, this is Karim. I saw the question regarding storage. We don't have the time to answer this question, or we don't have 1 or 2 minutes for that one.
Okay. You can start your answer. So question is.
Yeah, I saw there was a question about storage, to store electricity and to use from the wind and to use that during the night time. But you see, I wanted to answer this question because I think it's very important to see at which stage either Uzbekistan or even Kazakhstan they are in their power system. Today, the penetration of renewable energy, which are variable production, hasn't reached a stage where actually there is any issue regarding the absorption. It's just a question of managing differently the grid that you have. If you have, for example, gas turbines, then they provide enough flexibility. It means that basically you are just going to run less either the coal plants or either the gas plant, and you're going to save CO2 emissions. So there is no constraint at all to even double or triple the capacity of renewable energy, either in Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan. Now, after that, maybe you will have to think about different things. But for now, it's mostly a question of how to manage differently the generation assets that you have. And then you may have some constraints regarding the grid, and that's where you need to invest rather than investing in storage. Now, storage can also be used as, a virtual transmission line, so that you can maybe explore rather you either you invest in the grid, or you can have these virtual transmission lines. But basically today this is not a question of balancing the power from the day to the night.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Thank you for the added questions answer. And now let's carry on and get continued with the keynote from the CREMO partners. The topic is developments in renewable energy and their impact on project procurement, presented by the Yusuf Martin, managing partner, and the Meshitan business development manager. And hi, Yusuf. Hi, Mesh. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Very
Okay.
good. We've had some technical challenges, but seems like if we stay in the same room, it's working. Meishi, are you on the line? You put your screen?
I am. I just
But we can see every other thing that you have open. So can you please shut all of the other software, including Teams and Outlook, etc.? Okay.
Can you see now the presentation?
We can see the
Yes.
presentation.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
got it.
Right.
So Meishi and I are going to make this presentation together. Thank you very much, everyone. I run Cradnor Partners. We're a financial advisor active in infrastructure and energy in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And we are very active in Central Asia, among others as financial advisors to Masdar on some of the projects they mentioned, including the scaling solar project, which we are in the process of closing, and we are very excited about that. It's very exciting to be among you today as well. So Meishi, if you wouldn't mind taking us to slide 3, please. Can everyone hear me? Thank you very much. So talking about the region, clearly there are 2 separate blocks almost, right? We have Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, who are well advanced in very different ways, in fact, in procuring renewable energy. And we have Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, who are mostly hydro-dominated, so they already use renewable energy to a great extent, but where solar and wind procurement hasn't really started in any meaningful way, and where we await further developments. And in relation to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, the approaches have been quite different, as probably already highlighted. Uzbekistan is following, broadly speaking, a quite standardized international tendering and bilateral process with PPAs that are denominated in hard currency and with government guarantees, etc. Whereas Kazakhstan has a much more mature sector with a single buyer and where electricity exchanges hands in tenge. And the developments in renewable energy have happened in that context. If you could move on, Meishi. So here you can also see the energy mix and potential in those countries. To note that the solar PV potential is massive, as well as wind potential significant, both in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And Turkmenistan has quite significant solar PV potential as well. we're hoping that these will turn into real projects in the coming years. I mean, you can see numbers that are massive in these aspects. If I can just move to the next slide, and Meishi, perhaps you can talk to those.
Sure. In general, we want to highlight that in addition to the fact that there are strong resources to be harnessed in the region, there are also strong demand drivers. And until a few years back, there was a lack of renewable energy investment framework for foreign investors. But DFIs are working hard today to address, to provide technical support, the regulatory support, financial support to the projects in the region, as can be exemplified by the turnout to this conference. So we thought to highlight some key drivers and barriers, which the audience might already be familiar with. So in Kazakhstan, it benefits from having a liberalized electricity market. Prices are not regulated. Consumers are able to choose their own electricity providers. And this kind of environment fosters basically healthy price competition, and that will always favor the lowest cost technology, which is today and to a greater extent in the future, it will be renewables. Kazakhstan also benefits from having a strong vertically integrated government that is supportive of renewable energy. For example, the Ministry of Energy has a dedicated unit within it to promote renewable energy development. The FSC has been established as a single buyer for renewable energy mandatorily. And the electricity distributors, Korim and Samruk Energo, are also owned by Samruk Kenya, who is also supportive and have invested in projects themselves. In Uzbekistan, there is a strong national prioritization of renewable energy. There's strong collaboration with DFIs. In Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, they have a winter power deficit today that requires the import of oil and gas resources from other countries to meet, and they have an aging hydro infrastructure, and all of this would benefit from greater development of low-cost solar. Moving on to the next slide. We have seen that the recent auctions that have taken place in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan have given us prices that fall below the electricity tariffs in their markets today. So electricity tariffs in the market are already very low in the global context. And in Kazakhstan, you can see that the latest project, 50 megawatt solar from Eni, has given a price of 2.9 cents per kilowatt hours. And in Uzbekistan, the project that Kremor has advised on has produced a landmark price of 2.679 cents per kilowatt hour.
If I may comment a little further on this, of course, the sector's solvency is heavily dependent on end user prices. And of course, this area is quite politically sensitive, especially in relation to household prices. And a smooth transition in relation to cost-reflective tariffs will be quite important for the sustainability of the sector and for the continued success of investments in the sector. Of course, we note that quite large initiatives are potentially today overtaking Kazakhstan, but I think we want to also highlight that Kazakhstan's, let's say, sector maturity was slightly further ahead. As you can see, the end user tariffs are quite a bit more materially above the prices that materialize on solar tenders, although they still remain quite low. And in the region, of course, if you look at Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, the prices are even materially lower. Moving on to the next slide, one other area we wanted to mention is the power transmission infrastructure, distribution and transmission infrastructure, as characterized by the loss levels. This is another area that we thought it would be relevant to highlight to just illustrate the inherent structural infrastructure losses. You can see at the bottom the OECD average, and Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan are hovering just above that at the moment, slightly below 10%, while the three other countries, and especially Kyrgyzstan, are materially above. These are things, of course, that the typically public sector and the DFI's public sector arms would be quite well placed to support. And in time, these transmission infrastructures, or even sometimes upfront, can be privatized or be done under PPP-like schemes, although those tend to be a bit more complex to come around, whereas there clearly appears to be a need for speed in rectifying and addressing some of these losses. So that's the general context in the region. Then moving on to where we see wind and solar internationally, and what have been the latest developments, some of which have been highlighted in prior sessions, but I think we wanted to put those in context in essence, also slightly forecasting, explaining where we are today, but also forecasting the future. Meshi, if you could move on to, so this illustrates where we came from, how quickly we came from there to where we are today in especially solar procurement, right? The prices, the LCOEs in relation to Nurnavoy, Uzbek scaling solar, and the Kazakhstan latest tender, as crystallized by Schalder ENI's tariffs were mentioned. We are talking about sub 3 cent tariffs in both cases. If you rewind back to a few years ago, feed-in tariffs in Kazakhstan, which led to quite a bit of procurement, about 800 megawatt, started at around 8 cents only a few years ago. And the auctions that followed crystallized prices in the 4 to 5 cents. Of course, then we're just commenting on some of these technological, let's say, adoptions and prevailing practices without necessarily being too specific, but quite often now in tenders we see bifacial modules with single axis tracking, which also played globally, without necessarily commenting on a single project, quite material roles. If we could move on to the next slide. So at the same time, in terms of technology, I mean, this is quite mainstream and we are all aware of it, but we've seen several things. We've seen a continued cost reduction in terms of manufacturing per watt, per installed capacity unit, primarily a gift from China, as it were. Let's see how long that continues. That is quite transparent and tracked quite liquidly, as it were. There are trackers that you can see, indices, sorry, that track that. And at the same time, the efficiency, the size of the panels have increased, their intrinsic efficiency have increased, and the combination of the two has also meant that those were major contributors to LCOE. At the same time, we've seen parallel progresses on the wind side with turbines increasingly growing in size and gearboxes being simplified or sometimes getting rid of, with turbine technology also therefore, wind turbine technology also therefore supporting this ever decreasing levelized cost evolution, which has been extremely supportive throughout the globe, but also have carried the emerging markets, especially in de-risked project development contexts like tenders, which crystallized prices and also provided benchmarks for constructive and sustainable bilateral discussions as well. With that, I'll hand over to Meshi to give us further details based on public sources in relation to some of those evolutions.
Thank you, Yusuf. While we can see from this slide that reductions in solar and wind are driven by both technology and also market optimization along the entire value chains. The next slide, we want to emphasize that while value can be realized all along the value chain, it is important to recognize that solar, as compared to wind, as compared to CCGT, is still emerging technology that has only been in production for the last 15 years or so, commercial production to be specific, and there is much room to improve, and improvements in technology will translate into lower solar LCOEs going forward. We will touch a little bit on the learning rate of solar. So if we look at solar over its lifetime, its learning rate, which is the fall and the cost in LCOE, when production doubles. The learning rate of solar is 23% over the entire period of time that solar has been in development. But if we look at only the last 15 years when it's been in commercial production, the learning rate is actually 40%. So that's very much higher than, for example, CCGT, which is at 10%. This chart that you see on the page is made by NREL, and this was made back in 2018 when they predict what are the upcoming solar technologies that would bring about price declines. And you can see on it things that have been already realized, for example, bifacial improvements, which have been crucial to the region in bringing price down.
That's quite interesting, by the way. I mean, it is quite specific, right? They have predicted a 0.15 to 0.4 cents decrease in LCOE just on the back of bifacial, depending on how strong albedo region you're in. And yeah.
Exactly, and the sandy landscape. Mm-hmm. And very, very much suitable to the landscape of very much of Central Asia. And they also predict that the oncoming technology improvements, for example, improved efficiency of polysilicon use through less kerf loss, increased ingot size, increased wafer size, and diversifying wafer formats. These would be the upcoming technologies in the plants that will be installed over the next 2 or 3 years in the upcoming ADB and IFC gigawatt size pipelines. So these projects would benefit from these increased these technology improvements over the next 2 years. And the same goes for wind as well. The Mazda has commented in a previous presentation that today they are seeing 500 megawatt project using 100 to 130 wind turbines, and as wind technology develops, we see higher unit turbine capacities in order to make use of to better utilize land and interconnection. And we see that this will bring about also falling wind LCOEs.
And one comment on that, Meishi, if you go back, I think the rotor diameter is, of course, and therefore the area that produces wind actively, therefore, has been increasing massively onshore as well. You now see, in essence, offshore-sized turbines deployed onshore, with not only the hub height, but also the rotor diameter increasing massively. And that has been quite exciting, of course. Sorry,
and greater hub height will also bring about more consistent ability to capture more consistent winds. So that's also a advantage.
Absolutely.
And I will hand back to you, Yusuf.
Thank you. So look, all of that in essence provides has provided, and in our view will continue to provide, the perfect opportunity to crystallize increasingly attractive costs for renewable, albeit intermittent, energy from solar PV and onshore wind. And of course, for the region, these will be increasingly relevant. We hope that the recent Uzbekistan Asian needed that fully, and the system is sufficiently richly supplied, but hopefully as time goes, optimization through increased use of intermittent renewables may require the battery prices, while they continue to decrease in terms of costs and unit costs as well. Moving on to the next slide. So basically, what have we seen so far and where do we see things going? As we highlighted so far, we have seen large utility scale auctions as well as some utility bilateral developments as for example, Zarafshon, as mentioned by Mazdar a minute ago, both in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. What we haven't seen, and what we have seen in other jurisdictions progressively, will be development of large private PPAs perhaps, and more decentralized rooftop type deployment, primarily for solar. These are trends that we have seen in other markets. As the markets liberalize, sometimes this type of structures also come into the market. Do not always replace the large single buyer dominated procurements or bilateral procurements, but regularly come up. And they also come up sometimes in specific markets in wind as well, although obviously decentralized deployment, small scale deployment for wind is less efficient and less mainstream, but I think bilateral PPAs, corporate bilateral PPAs may work there. And similarly, I think what we anticipate perhaps is that if these messages or heat sources, but of course that has some way to go, we acknowledge, yet it's a sector that we're very excited about. That is it from us. Thank you very much, and would be very happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Yusuf, and thank you, Meishi. And many thanks for your insights of the whole energy, wind energy and green energy development in Central Asia. And we believe this knowledge should help more wind energy developments and the Westerns in this region, and help their business building. And now let's get the last keynote. And is there any questions? Time's up. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You.
Thank you. And do you have any questions? Actually, the time is up, and we don't have enough time to hold the questions, and so we just carry on. And now it's last keynote, the technical challenges and the way forward on development of the wind energy in Central Asia, presented by the Ashish Ranjan, Executive Manager, and BD Technical Service, Wind Asiwa Power. Hi, Ashish. Are you ready?
Hi, Bryce. Yes, I'm ready.
Hi. You can just start it and check your PowerPoint and share screen.
Sure.
Okay.
So let me know if you can see the screen. Bryce, is my screen visible? So Bryce, can you see my screen now? I cannot hear you.
Okay. I can see your screen, and you can start it right now.
All right. So thanks, Bryce, for the introduction. So the topic that we will be covering today will be the technical challenges of wind power development in Central Asia. Before we go to the subject, I would like to briefly touch upon who we are. So EcoPower is a Saudi-based company, and we are developer, investor, and operator of power projects and water desalination projects. And we have 58 assets in different stages of operation, construction, and as well as under development. And we are spread across in 12 different countries. We are having 3,500 plus employees, and out of which 60% or more than that are locally employed. The portfolio that we have is worth of $60 billion, and out of which we have approximately 37.7 gigawatt of power and 5.8 million meter cube per day of water desalination capacity. Coming to the renewables, out of this portfolio, we have approximately 21.5% contribution from the renewables, and this contribution is only going to increase in the years to come. In the region, we are present in Uzbekistan, where we have opened our office recently. So we are engaged with the ongoing wind development project in Uzbekistan, and other than renewables, we are also having
Sorry, Ashish, can you turn your character and your slides to the full screen? And
Sure.
There was a button, the second display setting on the bottom, up there, and display settings. Up the screen. Yes. And just click it on it.
Yeah. Is it fine now?
You can see there was a. Okay. We got it.
All right.
Carry on.
Okay. Thanks for so in the region, as I was explaining, we are present in Uzbekistan, where we have our office in Tashkent. And we are in the process of developing the wind project there. And other than renewables, we are also have recently signed the PPA for the combined cycle CCGT project as well. So coming to the subject, so when we talking about the technical challenges, so it's important for us to first touch upon the different activities that are involved in any life cycle of an onshore wind project. So it starts with the pre-feasibility and the prospecting, wherein we look into the high-level constraints such as the wind resource, the distance from the grid, as well as the distance from the main axis, and other important factors like the protection zones which needed to be taken care of. And so once we have the project viability proven at the prospecting stage, then we can decide to go ahead with a dedicated wind resource campaign. So wind resource campaign is typically runs for 12 months, and once the on-site wind potential is proven, then you can have the associated activities, which are mainly the micrositing, the permittings, the environmental impact assessments, the logistic surveys, the grid connection requirements, as well as the pre-engineering surveys. So once we are done with this specific milestones, then we move to the PPA and the project financing. And subsequently, we'll have the EPC contract in place, and then we'll follow the supply, construction, installation, and commissioning of the project, and subsequently the operation and maintenance. When it comes to the duration of these activities, it is quite important for us to touch upon because the technical challenges that we'll face in the initial stage of development will have a bearing on the timelines that we'll finally end up with. So this timeline are typical in nature what we are looking at. So any prospecting and feasibility typically takes 3 months. Then the wind resource campaign that has to have at least 12 months of wind data. And then in parallel, we'll have the permitting process, the environmental impact assessments, which typically will take at least 6 to 12 months, depending upon the project specific requirements. Where things becomes more interesting is when we apply this context, in the Central Asian, where we are seeing a good traction of new wind projects are being developed. So if the technical challenges are not mitigated or managed at this initial milestones, then the timelines that probably what we would be looking at like this. So prospecting, which typically takes 3 months, could extend to 6 to 9 months. Similarly, if the wind resource assessment and the measurement campaign, being new country, we cannot expect to have local expertise, so that it could get really complicated as well. So the timelines could get extended, from typical 12 months to 12 to 18 months. And same also applies for the other allied activities like the permitting, the environmental impact assessments, the logistics surveys, and the grid connection studies and things like those. The timelines that we are looking at are typical, and obviously we as AquaPower, we strive to ensure that the timelines, are mitigated to the best extent possible. But this could vary from country to country and could vary from project to project, but more or less this is the typical timelines that what we'll be looking at for these initial milestones. It is important for us to really understand that these timelines and the bankability or the viability of the project will get significantly influenced by the set of technical challenges. Now we'll see in the next slides that how exactly these technical challenges, which are a combination of the typical that you would see for any new market, as well as some of the challenges that are specific to the Central Asian countries that we are presently experiencing. So to start with, the ones that we can apply for any typical new market. So wind resource. So wind resource is the key, for any wind project, as you would have, also seen in the previous slides, that if the wind resource is not managed properly, then this could be the difference between a viable and a non-viable wind project. So just to give the context, a 5% difference in the wind speed could result in 10% difference in the generation. And this could be a difference whether the wind project is viable or not. But for any new market, like ones we are dealing with, like in Central Asian countries like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan and all, typically how you approach, for characterizing the wind resources, first you have the mesoscale maps from either public domain or you go to some consultants who can support on this aspect. But a mesoscale remains, with a high degree of uncertainty. And as a developer, we really need to see that the wind resource, wind resource potential is ascertained to the best extent possible. Further, the wind resource complexity gets challenged further with regard to the site size as well as the conditions. So if the site is complex, then it would really add significant complexity is managing the wind resource. So what we are seeing, the sites that we are presently working with, so within 20 to 30, within the 5-kilometer radius, we have a wind speed variation as high as 20 to 30%. So this itself indicates, what kind of wind variations that we can have if the wind resource campaign is not properly managed. Moving from the wind resource risk, we also have the land use constraints. So on one hand, we have the micrositing being done from a wind resource perspective. But if the land use constraints are not properly identified and mitigated, then this could significantly influence, the outcome and the viability of the wind project. So what we are seeing, that the projects that we are presently involved in, there are a variety of, the land use constraints that we have to deal with. For instance, the good wind sites could also be a good potential mining sites, or there could be other aspects that the authorities may be looking at for developing this specific land. So if these aspects are not properly captured at the early stage, then this could really jeopardize the overall viability of the project. Moving on to the next is with regard to the constraints and the information on the protected areas. So here we are talking about the avian and the birds and bat risk that has to be properly captured well in advance. So we know that the countries in Central Asia, there are a lot of hotspots for birds and bats, which could be significant either from a lander's perspective, or it could be also, important to understand from a local legislation perspective. So it's quite important to ascertain that the protected areas are properly classified and addressed at an early stage of the project development. Else it will either influence the micrositing assumptions, or it could result in some of the factors which could be difficult to mitigate. Moving ahead, some of the typical new market challenges that we have seen is also with regard to the capability and the track record of the local contractors. So with wind, we have specific requirements when it comes to some of the tasks like the wind measurement campaign or the pre-engineering surveys at the early stage of development. And being new market, it is prudent to expect that there will be lack of expertise. So Not having this could also jeopardize the development timelines, and this has to be properly covered and addressed at early stage. Lastly, but most important part is the grid code requirements from interconnection risk per se. So not having a dedicated wind-specific grid code could also significantly influence the overall timelines and has to be properly addressed well in advance. So here we have touched upon the typical challenges for any new market. Now, before we get into the specifics of the challenges that we could expect in Central Asian context, it's important to see that what we are dealing with. So here, for instance, I'm presenting the wind resource for Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, just to demonstrate that these sites are very windy. Means there is no doubt that these are one of the most windiest sites. But it is also important to understand, given the geographic conditions, we are exposed to some unique challenges, and this we'll see in the next slides. So first and foremost, when it comes to the Central Asian countries, we have to acknowledge that these are landlocked countries, which means the sourcing of this large turbine components could be really difficult, which are typically sourced either from China or from Europe or some specific pockets, but for sure not within the Central Asian region. So this could really pose unique challenges. For instance, the projects that we are looking at, the inland transportation for the turbine components, we are looking at least 1,500 kilometers. So this gives us the perspective that, these are some of the biggest logistic challenges that we will have to deal with for developing wind projects in the region. And we all understand, and as we have seen in the previous, presentations by, Kramer, that the turbine size, onshore wind turbine size are increasing, we are dealing with 170 rotor diameter machines. So to be able to manage the logistic constraints that this size of turbines would be posing would be really, really challenging from a logistics per se. Next on the subject is the overlap of this wind resource sites with the mineral rich areas. So as I touched upon before, many of the sites that we are looking at, they're also quite mineral rich. So they also have good wind potential, but they also have, quite future potential for mining activities, which could also, add to the complexities with regard to the land usage. So in such conditions, the viability of the wind project will get significantly influenced by the priorities that the government authorities would have set, whether these are going to be dedicated and should be reserved for wind development, or they should be earmarked for future mining activities. Next, on the electrical aspects. So we could see that there are unique challenges on the electrical aspects as well that are applicable for the Central Asian countries. More specifically, these wind sites are far remote, and which means, from the load centers, we'll have to have dedicated transmission infrastructure either to be built or we'll have to upgrade the existing transmission infrastructure. And from the other countries' experience, what we have seen for sure that the gestation period of the transmission infrastructure development is longer compared to the gestation period of a wind development. So in that case, if these aspects are not properly addressed well in advance, that it could really jeopardize the timelines that we'll be looking at for developing a bankable and viable wind project. Lastly, on the electrical side, we have we need to look into the experience of the transmission system operators and the load dispatch centers in managing the variable nature of wind resource. So ultimately, in these countries, we have very limited penetration. In fact, we will see very soon, the first either wind or solar projects coming, live on the grid. So how exactly the variable nature of the wind is being captured and is well understood, and the proper mechanisms are in place, how exactly this need to be mitigated. Not having this could really jeopardize the timelines of having a viable interconnection alignment with the TSOs as well as the off-taker. And also during the operational stage, how the load dispatch centers would be managing the variable nature of wind becomes one of the unique challenges that will need proper attention. So we touched upon the challenges, but we also need to look upon the ways to mitigate these technical challenges. So Specifically, this is not an exhaustive list, and obviously, we will have unique mitigations applicable for specific projects. But in general, it would be fair to say that the wind measurement campaign is the heart for a viable and non-viable wind project. And what we could see that there is a significant potential that we could see from this various wind sites in the region, but we have very limited in situ wind measurement. And unless the wind potential is verified with the in situ wind measurement, the viability of the wind project cannot be ascertained. So we need to have dedicated wind measurement campaigns so that the viability of the wind project can be ascertained. Secondly, and which is also linked to the the aspects with regard to the micrositing and the size of the wind project that could be conceptualized, is the clarity on the land usage. So there has to be a clear demarcation that which particular sites will be earmarked for wind development and which specific sites will be earmarked for other activities that the authorities do see are more important from a specific per se. Thirdly, with regard to the environmental constraints, so it would be fair to say that early engagement with the environmental authorities to clearly define the specific risk and the mitigations when it comes to the ISHA and the feasibility has to be looked at a much early stage, so that any potential red flag from environmental per se has to be properly looked at, and if at all there's a mitigation, should be adequately covered, else this could also jeopardize the viability of the wind project. As we touched upon the specific challenges that applies to the Central Asian context, for logistics, given there are unique challenges when it comes to transporting the huge turbine components. So for instance, we're looking at 170-meter rotor diameter machines, in which case the blades would be at least 85 meters long. So in that case, how exactly we can transport in this unique challenging conditions? So having an engagement with an international experts in such requirements, and also any mitigations, be it with regard to the port infrastructure upgrades, or if the roads or the bridges or the allied constraints, whichever needed to be mitigated, those has to be identified at a early stage of wind development. Otherwise, we could see that there could be surprises once we proceed with regard to the construction. Coming to the grid aspects, so the mitigations are multifaceted. So the first and foremost thing with regard to the grid interconnection risk, we have to have a long-term planning. So we could clearly see which particular sites are wind resource rich, and we could also map that what are the existing transmission infrastructure that we are seeing that exist in right now, and to be able to evacuate the future development plans for future capacities that the country is seeing for wind or solar projects. There has to be a clear long-term planning, so that whatever grid infrastructure upgrades that would be required are adequately captured well in advance, and hence the grid connection risk could be significantly mitigated in such cases. And as we touched upon, when it comes to the grid code, having a dedicated wind grid code is necessary. Not having it could result in situations wherein we will be looking at multitude of references, several standards, and the negotiation process could take real long time compared to if we have a dedicated wind specific grid codes. And lastly, when it comes to the capacity building, so yes, transmission system operators and the load dispatch centers and the other stakeholders, we have to have the sensitization that how exactly the variable nature of the wind could be integrated, and accordingly, whatever mitigations that comes into place are due addressed well in time. So with this, I'll just like to present our ongoing wind development activities in Uzbekistan. So these are the masts that APA Power has installed, and we are advancing quite well on these projects, and hopefully we'll see beautiful wind turbines in these sites sooner. So with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you, and would be happy to take a few questions.
Okay, thank you, Ashish. Thank you for your great analysis and the show of the existing challenge and the excellent ways out of the wind energy in Central Asia. And thank you very much. Hopefully we will see more and more international capital being injected into this blooming market in the following years. And today is over, and because due to the time limited, we can actually, I'm sorry that we don't have enough time to. Okay, let me ask you a question about it. There's one question that technical issues in developing in wind. What's the barriers of the logistical of the wind turbines?
So if I get it correctly, Brice, you want to touch upon the logistic technical challenges that are specific for the Central Asian countries?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So as I have explained before, we could see that most of these countries are landlocked. And we know that sourcing of wind turbine components is very, very specific. So either it will be sourced from China or it will be sourced from Europe if there is no local, local capacity. So in such cases, how exactly we can bring those huge components, to the site? So the inland transportation could be as high as 1,500 kilometers. So this would require significant, risk mitigations. For instance, whether the ports are and the infrastructure are sufficient to handle this large set of components, or if the bridges, or if the road conditions, or if the allied overhead transmission line constraints, while taking this turbine components are properly addressed. So these are some of the specific challenges that I could see that would be applicable, from the logistics per se, for the wind projects in the region. And for sure, as the wind market matures, and the local contractors, local suppliers, and the stakeholders, bring their knowledge and their experience, to further. So all these aspects could be mitigated, and for sure, this is something which is quite typical for any new market, and could be addressed, in due course of time.
Okay, thank you, Ashish. Thank you for your answer about the barriers of the logistic of the wind turbines, and thank you, and also thanks again for your valuable presentation.
Thank you, Brice.
Thank you. And okay, now thanks to our speakers. This is pretty much all of the green energy Central Asia Virtual's first day. And here I would like to sincerely post my appreciation on your participation. And I hope you have enjoyed this sharing process. And before the end of the day, I'd also introduce key issues about our exclusive online one-to-one meeting platform, which will be open for all speakers and attendees freely from October 19 to October 22, out of this live studio. And if you have any business inquiries and just like the questions left in the live studio, and don't hesitate to just leave the room meeting and use this cherished opportunity to build up the business networks with the speakers and the attendees you want to connect with. And at the last, thanks to all of the attendees for staying with us the whole day. And tomorrow, there will be another 2 sessions about the solar development in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And we will start next day's solar journey at 9:30 a.m. at the same live studio, Tashkent time, with solar energy speakers and you. And this is Lead Associates host Brice, and hope you enjoy this day. Bye-bye.